I'm here today with Ronnie Kroell, Ronnie Friend Kroell. Um, and some of you may remember him from reality TV and also from movies. And now you are getting involved in politics, so there is a lot to cover here. But first of all, welcome, Ronnie.
Well, thank you. It is quite a pleasure to just hang out and share this space with you after being friends for a decade. It's incredible how quickly time has gone by, but as I was getting ready to talk with you today, I was just so grateful for your friendship and kindness and support. And I sit here in such gratitude of you because you have been such a good human being. You have been there for the last 10 years with a kind word to support when I've been raising, funds for charity. You've always been there. And I see that you're involved in the community, especially the LGBT community, in so many different ways. Like, you're very active and involved and willing to help out and bring people's dreams to life. So I don't take it for granted, as I was preparing to just hang with you. I just like, wow, this is someone who's been here every step of the way, even though we're thousands of miles apart. Like, we've been connected. And so I'm very grateful for that. And I'm excited to, through this conversation, share a little bit about me, but also, connect on a deeper level with you. And I love what you're doing, with this show.
Thank you. Well, I don't know what to say now. Yeah, 10 years, and I was, I was, as a reference for that, I had the Playgirl cover, because I was watching it before 2010, and I said, yeah, that's around that, just before you had that experience that, I think it was in the year previous to that you had all the path of make me a supermodel, and then I heard you on the Feast of Fun with Fausto and Mark.
I love those guys. They're so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, yeah, in that period of time, and I remember that just after you were giving away some editions, signed edition of the magazine, and you were in New York in that at the time, and I think that just shortly after that you moved to Los Angeles. I.
Yeah,
I am able to put you in if you want to
chronological order.
Yeah, exactly, with these things, because it's but I mean, you originally are from Chicago.
Correct. Yeah, born and raised, grew up in the city proper until I was about, I want to say 12 or 13, and then my parents, my mom and my stepdad, we moved out to the suburbs of Chicago. And for my last year of junior high, because I had spent my entire time from preschool through 8th grade at the same school, even though we moved out to the suburbs, my parents commuted me back and forth so that I could finish and graduate with my class, because how horrible would it be to go to school, preschool through 7th grade, and then go somewhere else for 8th grade,
Yeah.
So I was pretty blessed that even though I moved into the suburbs, I was able to stay connected to that school group.
And as you were talking about that, I just had a memory coming of one of your interviews where you were talking about the time your mother discovered you kissing. I think it was the first guy you kissed, something like that.
It's my first boyfriend. Yeah, it
I
was,
things like that, and then oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those stories that I have to say has evolved over time. And you know, I can take that moment and look back and how difficult it was, because my mom and I have always had such a wonderful relationship, very connected. I'm an only child, and we have a very special bond. And my mom and dad divorced when I was 6 years old. So I saw my dad on the weekends. I spent much of my time as a kid with elderly grandparents that were very sick in the nursing home or in the hospital all the time. So my time with my dad was limited, and it was spent a lot of times in nursing homes. So I had to grow up fairly quickly. But my mom was always kind of the rock. She was always there. She did a lot on her own. She worked very hard, her 9 to 5. And I remember at times growing up, we did not have money. Like my family has never had money. So I remember there were times when my mom would make enough food or have enough food for just she and I, but my best friend in grade school would want to come over for dinner, and she would prepare dinner for us, and she would go without eating because she wanted me to have quality time with my friends, and she wanted to give me things that she never had when she was growing up. So she sacrificed a lot, and so there was so much love there. So fast forward to her finding me kissing my first boyfriend, and all of that moment, I can go back like it was yesterday, and it was so there was so much fear, but it was also liberating, because finally I didn't have to hide this part of who I was anymore. It wasn't the way that I would have planned it out.
Yeah.
If I had time to sit down and have a cup of coffee or tea with her and be like, Mom, I'm gay. But in a way, it was the universe's way of pushing me out of the nest and forcing me to figure it out. And it was difficult for the first couple of years of my mom finding out. You know, when it happened, my mom came out in the backyard to check up on me and my boyfriend, who were just having a romantic night under the stars, and we were kissing each other, and all I hear is, "So you're gay." And you've never seen a guy go flying so high into the sky, because I pushed him off of me, and he must have went up like 3 or 4 feet. And I jump up and I go to my mom, no, it's just a phase. I'm bisexual. You know, anything I can do to calm her down. And, you know, to make a long story short, it was a very tumultuous couple of years, because my mom, you know, she wasn't necessarily 100% hardcore religious or anything, but she didn't understand what really being gay was. She thought it was a negative thing because she saw so many people contracting HIV and getting sick and dying, and no mother wants that for their son. And also she saw how gay people in the community were being bullied and beat up and murdered. And so her heart was breaking on that level. But then, you know, as any parent does, they have their own dreams for you, you know, whatever that is. And
Yeah.
so a part of her dream for me to grow up and have kids with a wife and have the picket fence in the house and all that kind of went out the window in part for her. So there's a lot of anger and confusion and depression. And, you know, it took about 2 years, and then she came around 180 degrees, and she and my stepfather were out at gay pride parades with me. She was the cool mom that everybody wanted to have. And, you know, and I probably shouldn't out ourselves on this, but since we're talking casually, I can. You know, she was the cool mom that knew that as teenagers we were going to drink anyway, whether she liked it or not. So she always just said, you know what, you and your select group of friends can come over, and as long as I have all your car keys and I can monitor it and it's within safety, then I'll allow it. You know, she wasn't one of those hardcore parents that was, no, you can't drink, because she knew better. She's like, you guys are going to experiment anyway.
Yeah, but it's
But if they tried to leave and they weren't in the capacity to drive or something, she had the final say and would say, no, you're just going to have to spend the night. So she very quickly became the cool mom that everybody wanted, you know, wish they had.
I mean, I heard her talking about you. I mean, on the Feast of Fun, but also, I mean, following the relationship you have with her. You were recently visiting in Chicago a couple of 1 week or 10 days ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see, and you know, in those instances, I think that we tend as gay men or women or members of this extended community, we tend to forget that we have time to adapt to ourselves somehow. They just discover it in that moment.
Poof, we've had all this time to think about it and
Yeah.
figure it out and try to calculate and you know, try to figure out the pieces of the puzzle. And then all of a sudden this is just thrust on them. Yeah. And then we expect in that very moment that they have to
have the best reaction from them. Yeah. The reaction that you can say, yeah, they're cool. Well,
no. And you know, as I get older, and it's not even just with the surprise of being gay and having to work through that on my mom's part. As I get older and as we all have more experience and we realize how difficult life is, that, you know, I think when we're kids, we expect our parents to be like superheroes and gods that have no faults. Yeah. And as you become an adult and realize how difficult life is, and you have to embrace your own light and dark parts, that I have things about myself that I don't necessarily like or celebrate, but it's a part of me. Once I'm able to forgive and love myself in all my entirety, the good, the virtue and the vice, then you can look back in time on your parents and be like, wow, the incredible things they were able to accomplish and the things they were able to give me, even when they were under great stress and anxiety and pressure. Yeah, I may have been frustrated with some of the way things went down, or, you know, I thought that they could have done better, but they're just human, right? You know, parents are just human beings too. And so talking about then and now and where my relationship is with my parents, it's so beautiful when I can have an adult relationship with my parents. Like, it's no longer just a parent-child relationship. We're genuinely friends. You know, I talk to my mom and my dad more and more. He's opening up and allowing me to talk, but I talk to my mom about everything. And I mean everything. Some things she just wants to go, la, 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 I don't need to hear this. But I said, Mom, you said you want to, you know, you want to know things and you want to have this connection. So I'm just giving you the truth so that we don't have anything in the shadows, you know. And I've been able to go back and rewrite the narrative, if that makes sense, because I think so many of us today are plagued by the negativity from past experiences, whether that's with parents, siblings, friends. You know, we're holding on to that negative story that we've told ourselves. And so, yeah, growing up wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, and my parents aren't perfect, and I was really hard on them as an angsty teenager, right? And sometimes just didn't have any room for forgiveness or understanding of their own humanity. But as an adult, man, what a gift it is when you can let go of that old narrative where you only focused on the bad things, and you start looking back at all the wonderful things, all the laughter, all the smiles, all of the acts of generosity and sacrifice that they did for me. And then all of a sudden now I have this great appreciation, and I'm no longer a victim to the old narrative of all the nastiness. I can let that go. And now my relationship with my mom, my stepdad, my dad, we're still working on it. You know, we're still learning and growing, and especially going home and talking about politics. They're an older generation that have, you know, that are somewhat set in their ways on certain things. But if we start to converse because we care about our relationship and the love we have for each other, we have a lot more success, because we're not attacking each other. We're not trying to put each other down. We're just trying to genuinely have a loving relationship. And there are still some topics where we have to like have a safe word, where we're like, oh, let's table that conversation for another couple of days. Let's think about that and come back to it. That way we don't hurt each other's feelings or say something we don't mean, you know. But, you know, I love my relationship with my parents today, and I can look back on the difficult parts, and even that helped shape us into who we are today, you know. So it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, it's I see it as you claiming your own uh, your own power, your or narrative about it, so that you can really appreciate them from your point of view. And then I think at the end of the day, those things are in the past.
Right.
They're gone.
And if we torment ourselves every day with the past, then it's us holding us back, because we're living in that old narrative, which is no longer here.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was my, if you want, my entrance in your narrative, in your life. And as I was saying, just thereafter you left to go to New York, but many people leave Chicago. Even though there is a great scene, a great, the theaters and a lot of comedians.
Oh yeah, it's a very vibrant city.
Yeah.
It's very alive with food and culture and entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, just in recent years, you have many drag queens from Chicago that are doing great
all around the world.
Comedians and in any sort of arts, but many of them moved. So why did you decide to leave Chicago? Well, it's cold in
it's cold New York.
It's
too.
a good reason. I think it's reason enough to say I leave. Did you think that you will have more interesting opportunities in living, or was it?
Well, I had never dreamed of moving outside of Chicago ever in my life. It just wasn't on my short list of things to do. I thought I would live in Chicago my entire life. It wasn't until having the experience of living in New York for those 3 months, make me a supermodel, that gave me a taste of what the world was like outside of this, everything within my comfort zone of Chicago. And so I was given this rare opportunity to go and try something new. And I had been wanting to model for a couple of years. And I always knew that the modeling kind of epicenter was either New York or Paris or Milan or, all these other fashion capitals. So while Chicago had a lot to offer, especially in the commercial space, making commercials and stuff like that, New York was where you would go for high fashion and runway and doing big, elaborate print campaigns and things of that nature. And right after doing Supermodel, I was offered a contract with the same agent that represented the show. And it was just, and a model apartment where I could go experiment and live with some other guys and just try it out. And so I did that for a couple of weeks and I fell in love with New York. And I said, life was giving me this opportunity and I could take a calculated risk and try something new. And what's the worst case scenario? I don't like it and I can come back.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I learned about life early on is to do my best not to live with regret. I'd rather try and reach for something and fall short or realize I don't like it and go back than to one day be on my deathbed and be like, oh, I wonder what that would have been like if I did that, or I could have done that, or I could have done that. I've always kind of been that person to color outside the lines and take calculated risks and to jump and trust that the net would be there. So I knew I could always come back to Chicago. And I said, what do I have to lose, except this amazing opportunity to try something new? And that's a lot. So I said, oh, let's try it, and it was difficult, moving outside of my parents' home and living within driving distance is one thing, but moving states away where you're several hours away on a plane, that was a big deal, especially since I'm an only son. My parents don't have any other kids, so hard to be away from family, but I was grateful that my parents were very supportive of me. To this day, I'm grateful that I have parents that said, you know what, we could give you guilt trips, we could make you feel bad, you know, that we want you close to us, or give you some sort of obligation to us, or we could just say, go do your thing, go be yourself, follow your dream. And that's what they've always done. I mean, imagine calling up your mom and being like, hey, yeah, I think I'm gonna do the cover of Playgirl and I'm gonna be completely nude. Yeah, you know, so having that conversation with your parents and your mom just being like, well, you know, you're gonna do what you're gonna want to do, and that's your life. And you know, and actually, if I remember correctly, when I first told my mom that I was going to do Playgirl, she said, yeah, buddy, that's my, you know, because I think she probably even had an issue of Playgirl at some point over the years when she was younger. And so that initial reaction happened, and then she dialed that back because she had to be the parent. So she, you know, she dialed that back a little bit and was like trying to weigh out the pros and cons with me and everything. Anyway, I was grateful that I took that risk and that I have supportive parents, you know, that allowed me to do that. And I'm glad I went to New York first, because New York, man, it'll beat you up, and it will force you to grow a backbone, because it's such a tough city, you know, to live in.
But I've noticed one thing. I mean, in my experience, well, afterwards it's easier to say than when you are in the situation, obviously. But I've noticed, like, and I know this to be true, is that if you allow yourself to be in the moment, to have the experience, whatever the experience is, it takes care of itself. It happens by itself. You don't, if you trust yourself enough to allow the situation to evolve, I mean, you may or may not have an idea of outcome, but at the end of the day, when you are, it happens. Yes. Something happens, and it's always, it always takes care of itself.
Yeah.
You always land somewhere. And were you imagining when you were going to New York that after that you will move to Los Angeles? And I mean, it's not even change career, but enlarge your spectrum of career. Yeah. with this move. Could you have imagined this when you were leaving Chicago? I mean, you know.
I think I've always had grand vision for my life, and I've always known that I've had so many different interests. I was always so curious as a kid, even into my teenage and adult years. I never saw limits, you know, where everybody else had these rigid limits of, you got to choose this and you got to do only this and you got to be perfect at this, you know. They had all this structure and rigidity. And I was more of living in a land of what's possible and exploration. And, you know, for a long time, I beat myself up over that because I was so different from all these people that held this structure. They knew exactly that they wanted to be a lawyer their whole life, or they wanted to be a doctor, or they wanted to be a teacher. And I ran the gamut as a kid. At one point, I wanted to be a firefighter. At one point, I wanted to be a teacher. When I was 2 years old, I wanted to be president of the United States. And then when I was 15, 15, I started exploring this idea of fashion and modeling. And I was everywhere. And, you know, I had a friend by the name of Elias that told me, and he's a spiritual worker, very much in the energy and the arts of spiritual healing and understanding. He's like, Ronnie, your life is like a kaleidoscope. He's like, when you look through a kaleidoscope and it has all these different, beautiful, intricate parts that seem like they wouldn't go together, but when you turn the kaleidoscope, they magically all just blend and they create this beautiful scenery. And he's like, that's kind of what you are, Ronnie. He's like, you've got all these different moving parts. You're allowing yourself to explore who you are. And I've done that my entire life. I've modeled, I've acted, I've painted, I've been a writer. I have, you know, been a humanitarian. I explore all these different parts of myself, and I don't limit myself. you know, and where I am now is where I'm excited. I have all of this experience to look back on, and I get to ask myself and take inventory. What did I really enjoy doing the most? And what do I want to now prioritize moving forward? So I have all this data available to me, right? That I wouldn't have had before because I would have only been in this one area. And neither is right or wrong. It's just different, right? It's a different path. We all have a different path. And so where I used to judge my path, now I'm grateful because I have all this wealth of experience across different fields of career and life. And I really have a great understanding of who I am now today because of all those experiences, because I didn't conform to someone else's way of living. Or, you know, it's like when people should, I like this term of, I don't want to should all over your life. People tell you should do this, you should do that, you should do that. But why? Is that based on your experience and your own fear and your own failure at some point? That's where you get people telling people, no, you shouldn't do that. Well, should I or should I not do it? And are you telling me that because you had a bad experience? And so you're taking that bad experience and putting it onto me. And if I'm not a strong enough person to figure that out, I might take your negativity and may never find out something that I would love to know about myself. You know, I might, like when I discovered painting, it was because I was in a great relationship and I needed an outlet to really express. And I had never picked up paint before. I just decided to go to the paint store, pick up a couple of canvas and make some paintings just as an outlet. And before I knew it, my first painting, a friend was offering to buy it, you know, and then I discovered, oh my gosh, you know, if someone likes this, maybe I have some talent here to explore. So I sold my first painting and then I invested in more supplies. And before I knew it, over the course of a year and a half, I had 40 paintings. But I would have never known that if I said, oh, I wouldn't be any good at that, or someone said, don't do that, you know.
You are at the end of, I mean, you remain the only authority for yourself. You have to know by yourself what is right and what is not right for you. So they're not doing it. Most of the time they say you should not. They're not doing either. So
right.
No, I think should it's an interesting word, you know, and I don't know if you are familiar with Bashar, but it's one of the words that let's call them guides are saying you have to don't use it, forget it. What does it mean? You should or you shouldn't.
Right.
I'm telling you what you have to do, and my attitude in there when someone is trying to tell me what to do, not welcoming.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I had my parents trying to tell me for years what to do, and I always ended up not doing what they told me to do because it was in the idea shouldn't and fear and
that's where parents get clever and do reverse psychology. Tell you to not do something even though they want you to do it.
But you see, it's really and that's where I think the should becomes has its strength, is that it's fear based.
Yes. Yeah.
Give you
so much of I think what my parents knew and their parents knew and what we're trying to break through, I think today's generation and moving forward, we're trying to unlearn a lot of things.
Yeah.
There's such an authoritarian style, not only of governance, but it starts at home. And so many of us grew up with parents, and our parents grew up with parents that had this authoritarian style way of raising kids, which is do it because I say so, right? And there's a difference between that authoritarian style of saying, do it because I say so, which means I'm just obeying. I'm not organically doing that out of my own free will. I'm doing it because there's probably some consequence on the other side of that. So it's a fear-based, very fear-driven mentality, which doesn't allow room for much self-discovery and growth on our own. It's just a response to fear. But imagine if you had a parental style or a governmental style that within reason allows you to make those mistakes and learn from your mistakes and learn why it's healthy or unhealthy for you purely from experience, not because I've been demanded to do or not to do something. Anytime I'm demanded to do it, on the other side of that, there's a lot of resentment. I resent you for telling me how to live, versus saying, you know what, I'm behaving this way because I know it's the best behavior for me and for everyone around me. And even when my mom would yell at me as a kid, I remember it so clearly. She would have, you know, for the most part, she was very good, but every once in a while, being human, she would explode at me. She would yell, right? And I would go to my room and I would sit there for a good 15, 20 minutes, sad and crying. But what my mom was really good about doing was she would come in and she would sit me down and she would say, you know what, Ronnie, I'm really sorry the way I exploded at you. Mommy doesn't like yelling at you. But then she would go on to explain why the behavior that she yelled at me for was unhealthy, right? Why it was destructive, why. So I really have to give her a lot of credit where credit is due, because she could have just used that authoritarian style and that was the law, just because I said so. But she actually came in and helped me learn and grow through that moment. And then I started to behave the way she wanted me to behave, but because I understood why. It wasn't just because I said so.
But there's something interesting that I will go back to that you just said. Um, as you were talking, you said about mistakes. You used the word mistakes, but my question there will be, but do you feel that it's really a mistake, or it's more a experience that teaches you what you like, what you don't like, how to navigate in those things, so that, because if you don't do these things that you see as, that could be seen as a mistake, how did you know that that is
Right,
not good for you?
right.
You know, isn't it more in the experience that allows you to move forward and to exactly know from there on, yeah, that's what I want, this is it.
Sure. Yeah, that's the dual nature of our life. You know, you have hot to no cold, left to no right, up to no down, fear to no love. And so when you get to a place where I feel like you and I both are on our spiritual journey, and you're at that elevated level of thinking, you're in the 5D perspective rather than the 3D of right or wrong and this binary system that we all have to conform to, you could look at that and be like, well, is it really a mistake, or is it just perfect the way it is? Was it meant for me to have that experience so I could distinguish the two experiences, what I want, what I don't want, and it's helping me to navigate that. You know, I had a similar conversation when I was home with my mom about how human beings, we've created the construct of time and space, because that doesn't exist without our labeling it. We've created the labels of good and bad, because what is good and bad at the end of the day? But where it got a little hairy was when we started talking about, well, my mom and I are sitting on the couch. What if someone came in and shot me while I was sitting on the couch with my mom? One could argue from a spiritual level of enlightenment that her spirit wanted to experience that before it got into her body, right? She was meant to go through that experience. And if we're all the universe expanding and knowing itself through different permutations. So like, you're part of the universe and the cosmos unfolding, I'm part of the universe and the cosmos unfolding. We're just trying to know ourselves. We're all one, the greater one. But in the human experience, my mom would be very upset and not okay with someone walking in and shooting me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the human experience says that that's bad. But if everything's perfect in the scheme of things and how it's unfolding, maybe that experience was meant to happen that way for the greater whole. But it's very hard to make an argument to one's mother to say that getting shot in front of her is not a bad thing, right? Because it's pretty bad.
Well, that's interesting, because that is exactly the point when you have spiritual discussion and responsibility and creation, and when you explain, well, everything is created by the being, but then you have to explain exactly that this rape or these kind of things that happen to people and that are fear-based, or that leave a emotional turmoil, people feeling bad, and these kind of things that happen. And there is the disconnect of taking this higher perspective, and then you say, yeah, but from the human perspective, that's different. If you have someone shooting you, yes, okay, that's, you don't die, no one dies, it's the illusion of creation, right? But what was their intent in shooting?
Right.
There are the two points of view. They intended to do it. In their perspective, they are doing it. Because if people knew that you can't do it, it's not happening,
Right.
why bother?
Right. Well, and that's the interesting thing, again, because once you reach an elevated perspective, one has to get to a place in their life where they realize that energy can neither be created or destroyed. And if that's the truth, even though my physical body in that moment dies and my mom's human experience is tragedy, my spirit lives on and goes somewhere, if you see it from that perspective. So I'll go on living although my human body is no longer. And that's why also when you get to a certain spiritual understanding too, when people behave badly towards you, right? If someone says something nasty to you or tries to hurt you in some way, when you're coming at it from a place of enlightened thinking and spirituality, you're less likely to get angry and feed that energy back to them, because you know that that's a symptom of a deeply rooted pain or trauma. Because
they're exposing themselves.
Yeah, trauma, insecurity, and fear often present themselves as bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So that bad behavior is a symptom of not healing from that negative experience. And it's a signal to someone who's spiritual that that person needs more love and care and understanding, rather than the typical 3D human response, which is a knee-jerk reaction of meeting their energy instead of welcoming them into your calmer energy. And that's where that's the next evolution as far as I'm concerned for humankind. It's not like we're gonna grow another appendage or grow gills. We're being forced to evolve spiritually and emotionally, because we have all sorts of intellectual growth, but what we need to work on now is emotional intelligence. That we are emotional beings and we have the right to feel those feelings. And it's important that we allow ourselves to feel those feelings. For so long, men were told that they weren't allowed to cry because it made them less manly, right? But the truth is, crying is so healthy. But to be told that you're not allowed, think if the earth was told that it couldn't quake. Think if the volcano was told that it couldn't erupt. At some point, there would be utter destruction, because that's a healthy way of releasing that energy that's building up. So in the same way, if we're trying to tell ourselves that we're not allowed to feel, we have to suppress everything, and we're not allowed to feel, at some point that's going to erupt because that energy has to go somewhere. So you wonder why we have so much pain and destruction all around us in the world, because for so long we have oppressed the masculine spirit, telling it how it should behave, right? So then you have these moments of explosion and war because at some point they just have a psychotic meltdown and they go on a shooting spree because they haven't had any healthy way of dealing with that anger and frustration over the years. And then we're scratching ourselves on the head like, why? Well, the answer is so clear to me that we've been numbing ourselves for so long. Whether it's big pharmaceuticals throwing pills that is just a temporary solution, it's just deadening our awareness. It's not fixing any trauma or problem or rewriting the narrative like we talked about earlier, you know, in our conversation. It's not about any of that. It's just getting you hooked to a pill that kind of, you're no longer living anymore, you're just existing, you know. You're just kind of floating around, not feeling anything at all. I think we have to challenge ourselves today to go inward. And I think, you know, that's the silver lining of COVID-19. It literally put a pause on the world as we know it, and all of our easy distractions and all of our vices and whatever it is we get lost in. And it's forced us to really sit down. And not everybody's taking this opportunity to do it, but a lot of people are. They're like, who am I? Who do I want to be? What have I done with my life? How am I treating myself? How am I treating other people? What do I really want to experience? A lot of truth is coming to the surface now, and that's not easy because people have had to be alone with their own thoughts. And depending on how much spiritual work you've done or haven't done, that can be a really breath of fresh air, joyful experience, or that can be the worst feeling in the world because that chorus of negativity is just going off.
Yeah. Yeah. Many people have just gone crazy with themselves in between four walls and just with themselves. But I mean, if you don't love yourself, you cannot really be well when you are confined in between four walls, and that you can go out.
Mm-hmm.
And you're with yourself.
Yeah.
That you hate. How can it go well? Yeah, this a very challenging experience for many people, but for other people it's also, I think, an opportunity to see the self in that way and to realize that there is a problem. Because I mean, when you react in that way, is that you have a problem. So you that's the moment when you react, because many people are just saying, I have no problem.
You're right. They're in denial. I'm cool. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good until they are depressed and on medications because they just can't stand it anymore.
Right.
But they didn't see it coming.
But I think culturally, and I don't know if you'll agree with this notion, but I think culturally we have created, especially in the States, but I don't know how it might be across the globe. We've created a culture where we have to be perfect, and actually even more than perfect. Yeah. If you look at the way we use our social media and how we paint pictures of our lives, on how you get the highlight reel of everybody's life and how fabulous they are and how sparkly they are. And it's exhausting to keep up these appearances, right?
Oh, yeah.
To not allow yourself to be fully human. And we've created this cancel culture where if you make one mistake, you're dead to the rest of the world. You know, we're holding each other to these impossible standards. And so that's why I say, when I really started down the journey of understanding myself and accepting myself and forgiving myself, it allowed me to not only have compassion and love for myself in my entirety, but it allowed me to give that same love and compassion and understanding to others around me who are also only human. One of the biggest mistakes I think we make is we shame our shadow. And I think this is something, as we all start to do our shadow work and we start to know ourselves, we know all the great virtues that we have, how we're kind and caring and compassionate and all these things, but we have the darker side. We've got the jealousy, the greed, the ego, all of those things. But once we start shaming those things and try to remove it from ourselves and extricate it and put it over here to look at it as if it's not us, we'll never find the solution, because we're trying to pretend that that's not part of us anymore.
Yeah.
But the moment you pull that shadow self back into you and you don't shame it and put it aside, and you embrace it and you see it as imperfectly perfect, wow, you start to walk around so much lighter, because you know you don't have to be perfect. And then you're not pointing fingers at everybody else around you for falling and making little mistakes, or it's all that judgment that goes through our head. Oh, they're doing this, they should be doing this. Start to allow them just to have their own experience, right?
How has this side of you, or this side's not a side, how this part of you have grown through the years? And I don't know, I'm saying something that I know that is simply not true, but I'm going to say it anyway this way. But the outside looked into Los Angeles as an idea, Los Angeles, Hollywood, that side of bling bling and entertainment. It's really not really deep. It stays just in the surface, and there isn't really a deep emotional connection with what is done. How all of this come together? And as I say, I know that I'm using a stereotype, but it's interesting sometimes to use them. But
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Los Angeles and New York City in particular are both spaces that wounded people go. There's large migrations of wounded people to these places because whatever small town they grew up in or whatever area, they were raised in, didn't necessarily accept them for who they were. And so they felt like they had to hide or put on a show or be something that they weren't. So imagine a pilgrimage from all these little towns that weren't embracing people for being different. And so they have trauma and they have wounds. And they're all just flocking to New York and LA. And you put a bunch of wounded people together in the same place.
Interesting.
So, especially in Hollywood, if you've been taught your whole life that you're not good enough, and then you come to this space that we're all kind of wounded together, but trying to be loved. We all want attention and love, that we want to be accepted. But we've learned over the years the things that people didn't accept about us, or the things that we think they wouldn't accept about us. So we start creating these images of ourselves that aren't really us. They're fabricated versions of ourselves, or they're a part of us. And so what you have in Hollywood is you have my projected version of self that I fabricated, meeting your fabricated version of self. And we're having these surface level experiences, but we're never really peeling back the layers and getting down deeper, because we're both wounded people. We're both afraid of being hurt. So we have all these defense mechanisms. That's why I think it's so surface. And I think we all want to be loved and appreciated. So we try to figure out, well, what version of ourselves can I project that people will respond well to? But that becomes exhausting, because you're no longer being true to yourself. You're putting on a show. And I think that's especially difficult for people that are actors or they themselves are the product. Because when you think of capitalism, if I'm selling you a brand of coffee or a coffee mug, that is not directly me. it's outward of me. So even if you criticize it, I can make changes and alterations to this object far more easily. But if you're criticizing me and I'm the product, it's hard to differentiate that you're not criticizing maybe me personally as a human being that has value and worth, but you are criticizing me based on how you think I should fit into the industry. So in the modeling industry, the difference of 10 pounds and shedding that 10 pounds of water weight will get you booked and looked at in a different way than if I kept that extra 10 pounds of weight on. But if you criticize me because of my 10 pounds of extra weight, it's not easy to table who I am as a person. I could very easily think that I'm not valuable as a person anymore because of that criticism. So we artists are very sensitive people, because when you criticize us, it feels like you're criticizing us as a person, if that makes sense. And so imagine all the psychoses that goes on with that. You start to, not love yourself even more. You start to beat yourself up even more. That inner negative dialogue, so I think there is a lot of depth. I think people are just afraid to go there, because all we have to go on is our past experience. And what narrative are we continuing to tell ourselves? Just like I spoke earlier about the narrative I spoke of my parents. Sure, I could continue to live in that narrative of all the not so great things they did and the mistakes they made, or I can choose as an adult to let that go and choose to remember and write the narrative of how loving my parents were and all the times they sacrificed for me and they gave for me. But vulnerability is scary. Vulnerability is the key to unlocking our own personal prison, but it's scary. I had a business coach that once used to say to me, Ronnie, when people hit their head on the wall, the first time it hurts, right? Because why wouldn't it? You're hitting your head on the wall. Yeah. But after a while, it starts to feel good because it's familiar. It's a pain, but it's a pain that you know. Mm. But just on the other side of that, that's also scary. But it's more scary because I don't know it. So I'd rather stick with the pain that I know than try to discover. So many of us have identified with our pain and trauma over the years that we wouldn't know who we were without that story that we told ourselves, right? Because if all these years I've been telling myself who I am based on these traumas, and today, cold turkey, I stopped telling myself that story, who am I? I don't even know anymore. And that fear, for most people, of unknowing outweighs the fear of living the same cycle over and over again and living in the pain of the past over and over again. That's a safe choice. It doesn't take any work. I don't have to be afraid of what might happen because I already know. And I might even complain to you still how horrible my life is and how terrible it is. And you've, as my friend, you've probably heard it on repeat because you know the story. You've heard it 10 times before, So you probably just nod and smile and okay. But
I mean, when I listen to you and knowing a little bit your path and everything, your movie, I watch your movies, it's interesting because I see let's say a growth, if we can say it, and I don't consider it as a growth. There is no growth to have had. It's just being self, discovering you and being you. That's the thing. But let's talk human, and when you talk human, say, well, there is a growth, and a evolution, and I mean, it's fascinating to me. But well, I had already seen because following you realize, you realize some things. But now talking with you, I have this image of you on camera, acting, and then I have this image of you here talking with me, and you know, and you see the different words, um, and then I think of you as a painter, as a writer, and suddenly there is a pictures that start to, you know, to create itself,
Mm-hmm.
creativity of uh, and going, looking behind the wall of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you realize, well, it's not unknown. I already knew what it's behind that. I just didn't want to admit it. I
Right.
know what is there.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because we have so many facets to who we are. It's again, we go back to our human experience. We're a spirit living the human experience, and there are things in the 3D human experience level that we are meant to evolve and explore and understand. But and this is the beauty, and I've been talking with a couple of friends lately who have had breakthroughs, if you will. You know, when you're living a human experience, but you're really an all-powerful God, you're a spirit living a human experience. When you finally break old cycles that your human self have been kind of lost in, the same cycle on repeat, you know, the characters change, but the story stays the same, right? So if the universe is trying to teach you a lesson, if you didn't learn it the first time when it slapped you, it's going to punch you in the stomach the next time. And if you don't learn when it punches you in the stomach, then it's going to drop kick you the next time. You know, life has a way of pushing us outside of our comfort zone, no matter how hard we try to hold on to it. But there's been a lot of amazing breakthroughs lately that I've been experiencing with my friends that are on spiritual paths, where they're at a place now where they're able to sit in a place or the seat of the soul, and they're able to just be aware of their human experience. So in a way, they've kind of they're sitting and watching the movie of their human experience play out. And what they're able to do is recognize the old narrative they've been telling themselves, the potentiality for the new narrative that they can write. And now they're sitting on the fence. And this is where I celebrate their growth, because the ego and the fear and everything wants to pull you back to the old way of doing things because that's familiar. And you might even revert back to that old pattern in that instance. And then once you go back to that old pattern of belief and old behavior, you might even be inclined to shame yourself for doing it again because you know better, right? Because at that point in your growth, you know better, but you still chose the old frequency and vibration because it was safe and it was familiar. However, instead of going in, I've noticed my friends trying to go into that mode of shaming themselves for falling back while knowing better. But what my response to them is, no, 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 no. Don't shame yourself for falling back into that old pattern. Celebrate yourself for now being in a place where you could recognize that you went back to the old behavior. Because now, this is the first time probably in the entire history of that behavior that instead of going down the road of shame, you take the road of celebration and say, I don't have to be perfect, but now I'm aware. So the next time, maybe I'll still go back, maybe I won't, maybe I'll choose this path. But as long as I'm aware of it, right? And the vibration of celebration is a much higher vibration than the vibration of shaming. It's a lower frequency vibration, you know. So we all have to choose at some point what we want to experience in life. And in that moment, I tell my friends, celebrate, choose celebration over shame, because celebration is going to take you to the next step and the next step and the next step of your journey, you know.
But now my question is how, with all of this, where did the idea of taking a political stand and launching a political, let's say, conquest, first to the White House, now to the Senate. Um, why that idea? Why doing it? I mean,
I, you know, I think our founding fathers would be rolling in their grave if they knew that you could go into a lifetime of service as a politician, because politics wasn't meant for people to go and live and die in office. You know, our politics here in the United States, there's so much history, and much of it is bloody, and it's not pretty. It's very ugly. Um, for as much as there is to be celebrated and to be grateful for, there's also an ugly side of our history, which, you know, the winner gets to tell the history. The winner gets to write the history books. Mm-hmm. And it could be very convenient to sweep things under the rug that aren't pretty. But if you're omitting that part of the story, again, just like what we were talking about in Hollywood and created fabricated versions of ourselves, a country as a whole can project a fabricated image of itself and try to pretend to be something that it's not. So I think our politics, I think our governmental systems need people from different walks of life. I don't think it should just be lawyers. I don't think it should just be people that have decided they want to be a politician for the rest of their life. Politics was meant to be a representation of the community of which it serves. So wouldn't the best representation of the community it serves, wouldn't it be better service? Wouldn't the people be better off if Congress had doctors, lawyers, teachers, grocery store clerks, people that cared about the country enough to learn about how the governance system works and brought their unique perspective to Congress? You know, people that were really in touch with the community. Right now, you've got professional politicians that are catering to corporate desires and needs and wants because the system is set up as such that corporations are literally buying votes. You know, as a corporation, I can hedge my bets on whoever's running for office. So there's the Democrat and the Republican going head to head, and I'm, as a corporation, giving to both of their campaigns. So it doesn't matter who wins, I'm buying their vote because I'm whining and dining them, and I've got their ear, and I've, you know, got 2,000 lobbyists going to Capitol Hill every given week, you know, to fight for my need. So not only am I powerful as a corporation, but now my corporate dollars are being spent to have control in government as well. That's too much control, you know. So
you're running as independent outside of it's interesting because I'm more and more, I mean, my point of view on that is that, well, in the United States, you have the Democrats and the Republicans that control everything. But it's, I mean, it's not really, we have more parties here, but I mean, it's, you know, it comes down to the same thing. And what shocks me in the system is the fact that the people elect, you know, and then they elect representatives of a party, people that go in office, and they actually are representing a party, not the people, the party, a ideology, and they generally vote all together the same. Right. I mean, I don't expect every Democrat or every Republican to have the same idea. I expect them to have different point of view, because I mean, and so I'm coming more and more to the conclusion saying that if you have political party as campaign, why not? But when you are in office, how can you be part of a political party? Aren't you supposed to represent the entire spectrum and all of your constituents, not just those that voted for you or those
Right.
that, because
Right.
I mean, if you do
Right.
that, you kill half of the population and you keep just those
Right.
that voted for
Right.
you. I
Yeah.
mean, you know.
Well, and I think, I think back in the day before we had all the technology advancements that we have now, where information is available at our fingertips, the party system made more sense because for vetting processes and for trusting people, these were people that were being thrust into positions of great power. And today we can grill them. We can find out just about anything on them. WikiLeaks is letting things out to like tell us the truth on certain things. And we still have a hard time today, but we really don't necessarily need the two-party system. In fact, the two-party system as it exists today in this country, I would say is a greater national security threat than anything, because what it is toxic tribalism. It's basically turning our politics into a boxing match on HBO. There has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. And if there's a loser, it means someone's walking away feeling shame, not heard, beaten down, downtrodden, oppressed. But if we had, even if the two parties were actually functioning at their best, it would still be better than what we have today. Because now all the parties are doing is making the other side the bigger monster. They don't have to have a solid plan of why, when they're in office, they're going to be better for the country and for the people. They just have to make the other side the bigger monster. And when you're making villains of one another and monsters of each other, there's no room for understanding. There really is no intention to find common ground and solutions. There's no real intention to look at data and facts, because you're just more concerned with being right and grabbing power. So you'll take facts and data and you'll twist them and spin them and be biased about it to tell your narrative. That's what's happening right now. There's two narratives that are fighting to continue to write the story at all costs, even if that means the people suffer in the meantime while they're battling it out, for power. I mean, you look at even COVID-19, this has become way more politicized than it needs to be. It shouldn't be a Republican or a Democratic issue. It should be an American issue, a global citizen issue, because we should just want to get to the facts. But we're in the middle of a presidential year where great power is at stake, and both sides are going to say and do whatever it takes to either stay in power or grab power. So we, American citizens, are just trying to figure out, well, who do we believe and what do we believe and what's right and what's wrong? And meanwhile, we're living in such a state of fear that we're actually attacking each other. I'm not getting into a conversation with you to be like, hey, what do you know about this? And what can you clue me into that I may be missing? And let me do that, and let's get to the truth. No, I'm coming at it with my truth. You're coming at it with your truth. And now we're fighting to the death to make each other wrong. And then neither one of us has found the truth, because it's more about being right. So our politics really needs an enema. it needs a big douching because it's not set up to really take care of the people right now. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take people leading with love and leading with kindness and genuine intent to make progress,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And how does it work for you? I mean, being now running for the Senate, how is it working? Um, let's say, from the practical point of view, you have to campaign, you have to organize, you have your name on the ballot. I, I assume I don't know exact. I mean, I know I follow the American, election year, but how does it work when you decide I'm running?
Yeah, it's really, you got to ask yourself, and sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, if I'm up till 2 or 3 in the morning or whatever, it's just usually me writing in a journal or reading news. And when you make a decision to run for office, it really has to be about knowing who you are, knowing what the community that you're attempting to serve needs, what are those needs, and how are you going to be an advocate to lead the conversation towards solutions. And for me, because I see the danger of this partisan culture that we've created that's become so toxic, it's trying to figure out how do we get into a solution mindset, because all we're doing right now is chasing our tail. It's this constant blame game, and we already know how that ends. If you're constantly fighting one another, there's no room for solutions. So if I'm a civil servant and I'm lost in the blame game, every one of my constituents should be pointing a finger at me saying, why aren't you getting this done? Why are you even in office if you're not trying to find solutions? So you got to sit down. Like in California, I would really want to focus on mental health and homelessness. We have the biggest homeless population in the nation. In Los Angeles County alone, there's 60 to 70,000 homeless people on any given night. Many of them with mental health issues, many of them with addiction, because you get so depressed and you turn to drugs and alcohol and the like. And everybody recognizes that it's a problem, but you got to sit down and work with your community to figure out, well, what's the tangible solution? And are we going to find a solution together? Are we going to listen to each other and work on that? Or are we just going to keep blaming somebody? And right now, all we're doing is blaming. We're trying to make somebody else, and it's all their fault. And it's unfortunate, because when I think of the United States of America, the key word is united, right? And we're not that united right now. We're very separate, and both sides are throwing kerosene onto the fire of further division. And just as you and I, as spiritual people that are following our spiritual growth, and we're able to get into the 5D rather than the 3D of the human experience, the same is true of our politics. We need to rise above the 3D nature of the binary system of the us versus them, of Republicans versus Democrats, and making each other the enemy, to it needs to be all of us trying to solve the problem, right? And fully knowing that we may not agree on that, and that it's okay that we don't agree on that. But when that conversation, when we start to feel our blood boiling and our automatic response is to want to fight, to keep pushing through, and instead of fighting, figuring out what those healthy compromises are. We've lost the art of compromise, right? Not everybody has to walk away from the negotiating table getting everything that they want in that moment. Right? Everyone should walk away from that conversation feeling like they got a little something, even if it wasn't everything that they wanted. And that's how progress is. Progress is incremental. Change is incremental, right? But if one side or the other wins and decides that it's their way or the highway, and everybody else is going to get dragged along, it kind of goes back to our conversation about authoritarianism. And a parent telling a child they have to do something, rather than a child being naturally inspired through experience to do that.
Yeah, and from the perspective, from my perspective here from the outside. But I mean, and this is general. It's interesting because we are focusing on those that are really, appearing more in this. Um, how yeah, those that are the more making the more how do you say, being the more out there doing it. When behind that there are other politicians that maybe are less visible, but they have a different approach, doing a more, I'm not going to say spiritual, because I mean, you don't have to be spiritual, but having a more human approach of politics, and remembering, I think what should be the base of politics is that every good politics has to be human right. If it's not human right, it's not a good politics, because politics should be about people. If it's not about people, what can it be about? Corporations? Yeah, well, I know that there are some people in the Supreme Court that are arguing that corporations are people.
Right.
But, okay, right? So we're going to have what? Corporation universal rights? I don't know. And if you take every single people out of the corporation, is there still a corporation?
Mm-hmm. We have to find a way to, in my mind, stop making villains of everybody, even corporations. It's important to bring to the forefront of our conversation the realization of how the current system is not serving the people. But I think when you make villains of anybody, whether it's super rich people like Bezos that owns Amazon, or if it's the media, or if it's Republican, if you put a blanket statement over everybody, then they're less inclined to want to work with you. Think of it yourself. If someone paints you in a poor light, you're less likely to want to work with them. So
work with them.
Right. So it's like Lincoln used to say, if I make an enemy my friend, or a perceived enemy my friend, or I find whatever that common ground is, then there's room for growth, there's room for collaborative effort, there's room for peace, there's room to make sense of whatever we're debating or arguing about. But if we're making enemies of one another, then the goal really becomes to eliminate the other person. So, we get lost in the argument over race, religion, gender, ageism, sexual orientation, ability or disability. We have all these different labels and boxes that we check off, and we try to make sense of the chaos around us. But there's no greater separation in my mind than that of economic equality, because that gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And instead of teaming up with one another, we're choking each other out because we don't like someone because they're Black, because they're gay, because they practice Judaism instead of Christianity. We have all these different things keeping us busy and angry with each other, when those same people could be our allies in the greater fight, which is economic equality. Because while not everybody needs to have Dom champagne and caviar every night, they should not be sleeping on the streets. They should have a healthy meal in their belly every day, several meals a day. And however we're treating the least of our people is going to come back and hurt us as a society as a whole. So today, the US government, and there are those that would want to try and say that, oh, these people just want to be communists. They want to give everything away for free. Yeah. But is that not what we're doing when we give out corporate handouts from the government that are taxpayer dollars? It's socialism, but it's corporate socialism. Yeah. And what we're learning is that socialism is okay when it's giving big bailouts and grants to companies, who then, mind you, by the way, just give raises to their CEOs and their shareholders and they fire everybody else.
Yeah.
So they're getting all this government handout that was hardworking taxpayer dollars that are going to bail them out, and then they're firing people and not providing any job opportunity. But what if it was the flip side? What if we got every single one of the 560,000 homeless people off of the street? You're going to eliminate much of your mental health crises. You're going to eliminate the spread of germs and all that stuff on the street. You're going to eliminate and lessen theft because people have enough, right? The basic poverty, being above the basic poverty level. They have a house, a safe space to live, meals in their belly, and from there they can go on and do whatever they want to be a contributing member of society, you know. But I can't see us continue to be, there's such discrepancy and there's such a stark contrast from what the United States preaches versus what it practices. And until we reconcile the truth of our nation, until we realize how our government has built this nation on the blood of Native Americans, until we recognize that this nation has been built on the blood and the sweat and the tears of African Americans, until we realize that this country has oppressed women, has oppressed LGBT, has oppressed those with disabilities, until we are able to have a healthy sense of guilt and stop sweeping inconvenient truths under the rug, until we're able to look at it directly in the eye and say, this is a part of our history. We don't have to shame it, but we do have to understand why it hasn't been healthy if we want to find the solution moving forward. Are we really a country of life, liberty, and justice and equality for all? And if we're falling short of that, any good business is going to look at it and analyze it and figure out where they're falling short. And they're going to make adjustments to make sure that they are practicing what they preach. And I think we as a country have to do that, but we're not going to be able to do that until we heal. Now is the time for healing, right? We have to heal, because what we as Americans, in all of our glory and all of our beauty and diversity, we're trying to build a home together on quicksand because we haven't reconciled our past.
Yeah.
The key to moving forward is to reconcile our past and in this moment decide. Doesn't matter what race you are, what religion you are, what gender you are, how old you are, what abilities you have or don't have, how much money you have in the bank. We need to create a standard of living by which all American citizens can agree upon, and also those that want to come here and reside here, whether it be temporarily or become a citizen. We have to create that baseline. And we have to recognize where our systems have failed certain groups of people over the years, you know. And I say bail out Main Street. All these corporate dollars that are being given to these big corporations, they're not spending them, they're laying people off. So if you start, let's say, reparations for the Black community, if you create a reparations bill of however many trillions of dollars and you find a way to accordingly put that out into the community, where are those people going to spend their money? Back into the community. It's not like they're going to hoard it. It's not like they're going to dig a ditch and hide it.
Yeah.
They're not going to sit on it. They're going to spend that wealth, and that wealth is going to go back into the community, and it's going to go back, and money was meant to flow, right? Yeah. So even, I don't know if you followed Andrew Yang, who ran for president, but even Andrew Yang was looking into the basic, universal basic income, or UBI, which is just basically a monthly allowance that keeps people above poverty. And then whatever they want to do with their life above that and beyond is what they want to do, you know?
Yeah, because, I mean, they always say it's a question of money. There isn't about enough money. The government doesn't have enough money. They have enough money. There is enough money. Of course, there is enough money to give to everyone not a luxurious life, but at least a decent life where you have a roof and where you're not, yeah, in danger of, I mean, outside every night, and that, I mean, decency, the basic of decency, and 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 they have what it takes to do it. But then, I mean, you know, it's a question of will, of decision, of choice. It's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
It's a choice
And
of
I understand both sides, because there are people that are against universal basic income because they look at it as a handout, and they think that people aren't going to work hard, you know, to get themselves out of a situation, you know, or what have you. You know, so I get, and I understand, you know, if something's just given to you, um, you don't always appreciate it as you would if you had to put in the blood, sweat, and tears into to earning it, right?
yeah.
Um,
You,
but I think there's going to be lazy people with or without universal
exactly.
basic
And
income.
you can be
If you're
surprised.
just a lazy person, you're probably going to just be a lazy person, whether you have money or you don't have enough money. Um,
I mean, often is they say, oh, it's not going to work because of this, because of that. And often say, have you tried? Have you really tried to do it? In order to know if it works, because if you say it will not work for this, how do you know? You haven't tried it. People are lazy. Really? I see hardworking people working 2, 3, 4 jobs to feed, and I, this is something that I want to say to you is, you know, I've from our perspective here in Europe, often people say, who Americans, they're dumb, they understand nothing, they even don't know, they don't do the difference between Switzerland and Sweden, you know, these kind of things, stereotypes, and 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 then I think, well, yeah, I mean, you can find dumb people everywhere. I mean, people that, you know, it's not a question of being American or European or whatever. But then I watch, let's say, some TV. I was watching um, on Netflix something, I do, people getting married anyway. But it's not the reality, it's the people, the real people that are doing it, where you cannot fake it. It's just the reaction, you can see it. But what I found interesting in this kind of things is that you are exposed to, let's say, the real America. If you are watching um, above the reality TV, and you really look at the people, and this kind of thing, you really say a completely different narrative in what America is, and or what the American people are. And you are able to connect and see really that they are, I mean, you're people, and
right.
you're not just an image of something. There are people living in America, and when you see that, you realize what people are living, the real experience of America, and how hard working they are, how many Americans are just living the traumatism of this society that is very demanding of
Yeah.
you. You know, it's not easy to, I mean, you know, we have this thing of the American dream. Well, when you are in America and you are living the dream, where you have to work your ass off or you are not making it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and you know, seeing that, I was just thinking, I realized that, you know, this stereotype, and also when you have politics as the first entrance into America, and you see, well, the president, and you see the Senate, and these people just fighting over everything for nothing. yeah, you can't just have a hit your head on the wall and not see behind that what really makes America, and that's the American people.
But it all comes down to our money. You know, at the end of the day, our politics is so centered around money. And, you know, Bernie Sanders championed a more progressive approach. And if I'm honest, and it may be an unpopular opinion of my friends that decide to watch this if they get this far, but I think that I genuinely feel like the powers that be in the Democratic Party would rather lose with Biden than win with Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a certain status quo on both sides within the power structure. Again, going back to where parties are helpful and hurtful, this is where it becomes hurtful because Bernie Sanders is an independent and he decided to run for president on another party's ticket because he'd have more visibility and a better chance at winning. But when the powers that be within the control center of the Democratic Party realized that this outsider was gaining traction and so much power, that became a threat to the way they do things. The same way Trump took over the Republican Party. The Trump Republican Party of today is different than the Republican Party of 4 years, 8 years, 12 years ago. And in the same way, Bernie was a threat because Bernie was a man of the people. He was preaching about the people and doing what's right by the people and all of this. But if Bernie Sanders became president, he would decide then who he surrounded himself with, and he would ultimately shape the Democratic Party. So I think in a lot of ways, the Democratic establishment pushed Joe Biden, even though I don't think he's the right candidate to go up against Donald Trump come November. They'd rather lose with him and try again in 4 more years with another one of their more establishment polished candidates that would represent their power structure than win with Bernie Sanders, who would then shake everything up.
Well, the only thing that I found revealing is when it was a Super Tuesday, I think, when it comes Super Tuesday and suddenly everyone drops out except from the only one that could take
votes away from Bernie, which is
from
Elizabeth
Bernie.
Warren.
And I thought, this is too coordinated to be not
it
coordinated.
No, it was coordinated. They call it Bloody Tuesday. Bloody Tuesday for Bernie Sanders because whoever was making the calls behind the scenes and strategizing everything, there I am. Whoever was making the calls and strategizing everything behind the scenes, that was all orchestrated.
Yeah.
You know, you have a certain number drop out and support your preferred candidate, Joe Biden. You leave Elizabeth Warren, who's a progressive, in the race that can take votes away from Bernie Sanders, you know. So,
you get,
and there you have it. And there you have it. And now we have Joe Biden, who is not as popular as Bernie Sanders was. He was kind of the establishment's pick, and they're struggling. They're struggling. And I'm interested to see what happens because if Trump wins re-election, sorry, someone keeps calling and I put it on do not disturb. If Trump wins re-election, I think all the elites in the Democratic Party need to stop pointing fingers at everybody else and start blaming themselves because their own greed and their own need for power and control will ultimately be the reason why they lose the election. They can't blame it on some Bernie Sanders or anything like that, because more and more people are getting to a place where they're just tired of fighting. They're tired of having to pick Republican or Democrat. They hold some ideas that are traditionally Republican and they hold some ideas that are traditionally Democratic. So why do I have to pick a side? Can't I hold both at the same time? You know? Is there a better way in the middle to go forward together rather than being on such polar opposite sides of the spectrum? You know?
Yeah. So now, what's final thing? What's upcoming for you? your projects and also, I mean, with the election being four, 4 months away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's right around the corner. I'm at a place in my life now where I know that I'm an artist and I know I'm a humanitarian. Those are the two things that are kind of like my compass rose, if you will. They're my guiding light. And for so long I micromanaged and tried to manipulate every part of my experience to my own disappointment. It's one thing to have a vision for what you want to do, but when you get so down to the micro details of everything, if you plan it out too well, you don't leave room for the magic to happen.
Yeah.
I'm learning that I can adjust my sails just enough on the direction of where I want to go, but then I've just got to trust my process, trust the work that I'm doing, and allow the beauty of the universe to work in my favor rather than my ego sitting in the driver's seat. So now I'm at a place where I'm working on a couple of artistic projects. I've got a couple of reality TV shows, a talk show, and another show that I'm cultivating with groups of friends. I'm learning the importance of teamwork, and sharing responsibilities rather than feeling the need to do everything myself. Which there's a beauty in that, because you have to learn how to delegate and let go and not feel responsible for everything. You're kind of co-creating something, which is really beautiful. And as far as the political aspirations go, you know what? I haven't 100% decided to pull the lever to run for US Senate in 2022. I may or I may not. I know at some point I'm going to get involved in a political position. But I'm also at a place where I know I don't have to rush it. If I do some more conversating with friends and mentors over the next few months, and I see a path to winning a U.S. Senate seat in 2022, and it's the right timing and everything, then I'll pull the lever and I'll do it. But I don't want to do it just to do it, but so much of my heart wants to look out for people. So whether that means I do it with an art project, a television show, or in Congress, as a senator, that's all I want to be doing. I want to be looking after people, and I have to assess where I am, assess what my talents are, and figure out what I have to give, and then just trust the process. But right now I've got a great group of friends around me. I'm asking them what they see, what, from their perspective, what changes they want to see. I'm asking a lot more questions these days rather than presuming what people want and need. You got to really feel it out. And I think a lot of politicians want to smile and wave, and when they give big grand speeches, they're speaking to an ideal audience in their mind. But the truth is, we're a nation in pain. There are so many people that are hurting right now. And if I, as a wannabe politician, fail to recognize where people are right now and pretend like everything's just fine and talk about how amazing we are, then I'm skipping a step. There are people that have lost friendships of 20, 30 years over politics. They've cut each other out of each other's lives. There's people that are estranged from their family. There's a lot of healing that needs to be done in the coming months and years. Politically, from COVID, 130,000 people in our country alone. Mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, friends that we've lost. There's going to be a lot of grieving. So as a politician, I want to lead with my heart, working in tandem with my brain. I want to really humanize politics for people. And
I was told that there is a interesting thing that is open, that is not really explored so far, and it is spirituality in politics, which at the first sight, we'd say they don't go no, they don't go together. But why not? Why shouldn't politics invite spirituality in it? Knowing that we're not talking about religion at all. Spirituality has, in reality, in my opinion, nothing to do with religion. It's really
Sure.
the being. So that's I think that's a huge thing that of opportunity and of going into politics in that way and making the link between the, let's say, the two words. But
And I think it's also taking emphasis again away from this culture of us versus them and turning it into us versus the problem. As a politician, I really have to force myself not to make blanket statements over an entire group of people, because I'm shooting myself in the foot if I say all Black people, all Republicans, all women, all gay people. It doesn't work that way. I want to welcome people to my team regardless of how they identify themselves, you know, because at the end of the day, if your goal is to make your community a better place, this country a better place, I welcome all people from all walks of life that in a loving way want to teach and be taught, to have really meaningful conversations. And I think if we're able to diffuse some of this hatred and lay to rest some of our ego and fear, we'd be able to do a lot more. And when people are coming from a genuine place of feeling inspired because they feel like they're being heard, because they feel like they have a real investment, something to gain from being involved, that's when politics becomes fun. You know, politics becomes fun when people are excited to be there. It doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be maddening or angering. Like, politics should be fun. And I want to find a way to bring fun back to politics. You know?
yeah, that's definitely missing.
And you know, there's beauty in knowing that you don't have to know everything. There's beauty in knowing that even as a leader, you don't have to know it all. The most important thing when I think of leadership is the ability to communicate, the ability to welcome people from all different walks of life and appreciate different perspective, and the ability to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, you know?
And people that contradicts you.
Yeah, because you don't want a team of people around you that are just going to agree with you all the time. You want people that are going to be constructive and offer constructive criticism and show a different perspective or a different understanding. Because as the leader, your job is to pull from all these different people's knowledge base and experience and then make the best decision. That's where you then execute your power of leadership, because now you've done your job. You've explored everything, you've learned everything there is to know, and now your job is to lead with that information and allow others to lead in whatever capacity you've assigned them to lead in. Because if I were president of the United States, I would want a secretary of education that has the wealth of experience in education, you know, to draw upon, you know, to do that job.
To do a good job for the children, for the parents and everyone, and not just disrupt everything and always less, and then you're surprised it doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much you and I could talk about on politics alone, because everything's connected within systems. And instead of getting angry with each other or making villains of one another, let's talk about how the systems either are or are not serving us. And let's talk about the systems over here, so it's less about our ego and it's more about just getting to solutions. This is where we're stuck. This is where we keep hitting our head against the wall, because we've been so trained in this culture of ours to behave in this way. you know, to be angry with each other, to put each other down. It's a cycle that we have yet to break. And I think that if we had leaders in positions where they were having the right conversations and more warm and welcoming and embracing people from different perspectives rather than making them deplorables, as we call them in the, you know, in the southern states, or snowflakes for the more liberally minded people, if we stopped coming up with all these awful names to call each other and separate ourselves, that we'd be able to figure it out.
Well, yeah, the potential is just limitless, and you can do with the right mindset, and you can do everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not unstoppable in the sense, yeah, not unstoppable. We are number one of the world. It has to include the globality, all the world. But at that point, who cares? Because
Yeah.
everyone is moving in the same direction anyway. So you can really, with the right mindset and really when you go into a let's say a politics that works for everyone, it can't be anything else.
Yeah.
It's well, yeah. But I mean,
It's not going to be.
we're moving there.
It's not going to be solved overnight. You know, it's not going to.
I think we are taking that path. We're going there. It's the. I mean, we're getting there.
Yes.
We still have the old guard trying to hold on.
Yeah.
They don't want to let go.
Well, and it's important. It's important that you bring that up, because I think one of the biggest challenges is ageism. I think that even going home and talking with my parents, from their baby boomer generation to my generation, there's a disconnect, because their generation is looking at millennials and beyond as whippersnappers. They're disrespectful, they're lazy. And then, you know, this up and coming generation is looking at the old guard as not being smart or ignorant or living in old ways of doing things that aren't working. But both are not valuing each other for what they could do together, because youth and innovation is wonderful, because the world is your oyster and you can see possibility. But the blind spot of that youth and innovation is, without experience, it lacks control and restraint. So if you completely discount an entire generation for being old, or you think that they're not worthy anymore, or you think they're outdated, you're doing yourself a disservice. And the same is true of the older generation, because they could learn a thing or two from the younger generations. So if we stop being at odds with each other and we started having more respect cross-generationally, we would also be working better together as well, because that fear is winning. And I notice it even when I go home and talk to my parents about topics of today, the way I see the world, the way they see the world. But what could happen if we actually listen to each other? If they embrace some of my youth and innovation and technology, and I embrace their experience, instead of discounting it and saying they don't know what they're talking about. No, they've lived 60, 70, 80 years. They know a thing or two about life and how these cycles work, you know? So.
Wow, we are 2 hours in. Wow, I was not, I mean, it's amazing, and we could keep going for all night. I mean, all afternoon for you.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we've talked a lot about things, and I'm sure you can edit and take different parts and.
Oh no, no, it's going in this way. It's just fantastic. Amazing. But I think that it's time to, unfortunately, but you know what? This today, I have to say, time has we perceive it, it's accelerating. I didn't see today pass. I this morning, I didn't have a morning. I sit down for my home officing, and I just stand up. It was 12, it was midday, and I said, but I just sat down.
Yeah.
Just anyway, Ronnie, wow. I don't know what to say. This is amazing. An amazing conversation, and I mean, we could really, there is so much, and we could still talk about, but maybe another time, next time.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think we talked about a lot in general today, but if we ever want to sit down and have another conversation, we can dive into some of the specifics of things.
Absolutely. Maybe.
But
yeah, no.
I appreciate you, and I'm very grateful and for your time and your energy and your willingness.
I'm thanking you for this gift, this amazing gift of accepting, coming in, and sharing this moment, well, with me, but also with everyone else. As I say, well, as I always say, is not a question of time, because everyone has already joined in, as
Right.
it's all now. So doesn't matter when in time you come in, you are already here now. So that's that's I mean, it's like that, and I love to imagine it like that everyone is already here. Yeah. This, and well, you see, this is what I love by when allowing it to happen freely, is that you cannot even imagine what is going to be, you know, come in and appear in the discussion in the chat.
Yeah, and that's exciting to me. That's so exciting to me, because, you know, you don't have that rigid structure. You have a general idea, but allow spirit to move you in the direction in which that's going to flow. Because if I had it in my mind one way or the other, or you did, we could cut each other off and stop each other from the beauty of just allowing and unfolding and flowing, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, I'm here in this moment, grateful and excited to just learn and grow with you, and you came with the same energy, and we're laying down a really great foundation for others to hop into this conversation online and watch it at a later time, and to even reach out and have further discussions with us, you know.
Absolutely.
So it's a really beautiful thing, and I'm really grateful that you included me, and yeah, you're awesome.
You too. Thank you for coming in. So okay, thank you to everyone watching, coming in and joining us in, as I said, any moment in time you do it. Love you all for coming in. Thank you to you, Ronnie, for this amazing gift of coming in and sharing this moment with all of us. And yeah, let's do it again, and see you, all of you, next time.
Have a great one, everybody. Take care of yourself and take care of other people. It's important.